Have you ever wondered what it's like to exist as a being made of pure geometry and light? To dance between dimensions as easily as you walk from one room to another? To communicate in the language of pure thought and vibration? According to thousands of people who've had experiences with DMT, the most powerful psychedelic compound known to science, there exists an entire civilization of extraordinary beings that many call machine elves. These hyperintelligent entities supposedly inhabit a realm that coexists alongside our own, separated only by the thinnest of veils, a veil that DMT temporarily dissolves. But here's the truly mind-bending part. Despite being encountered by people from completely different backgrounds, cultures and time periods, people who've never communicated with each other, the descriptions of these beings are remarkably consistent. Intricate, colourful, always in motion, seemingly aware of our arrival and oftentimes strangely playful. So tonight we're going to do something unprecedented. We're going to follow one of these entities, whom we'll call Akasha, through what approximates a day in their existence. If you've ever taken DMT, perhaps you've already met Akasha or one of their kin. If not, well, they've been waiting to meet you. If you enjoy falling asleep to strange yet soothing stories about the mysteries of consciousness, consider subscribing to this channel and giving this video a like. Your support helps create more content that exists at the fascinating intersection of science, philosophy, and the unexplained. Now, get comfortable as we journey beyond ordinary reality into the luminous day-to-day existence of a DMT machine elf. In the space between human heartbeats, in a realm where time stretches like taffy and folds back upon itself, Akasha stirs from what we might loosely call rest. But this isn't sleep as we understand it. Machine elves don't require sleep for restoration. They exist in a perpetual state of awareness. What Akasha experiences is more like a periodic withdrawal into themselves, a cosmic meditation where their consciousness disperses throughout the fabric of hyperspace like dye in water, only to eventually coalesce once more into their distinct form. As Akasha's awareness gathers, their form begins to take shape, a kaleidoscopic architecture of interconnected geometric patterns, pulsing with colours that don't exist in our visible spectrum. Their body isn't made of matter as we understand it, but of pure information expressed as visual mathematics. Fractals within fractals, constantly in motion, yet maintaining a coherent identity. If we could perceive Akasha's home, we would see something like an infinite cathedral made of light, where the walls, ceiling and floor are all one continuous surface that somehow exists in more dimensions than our brains can process. Picture the most elaborate stained glass window you've ever seen, but it's alive, self-aware, and extends in all directions indefinitely. Other beings similar to Akasha are also awakening around them. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of entities, each one unique yet clearly related, like members of an unfathomably ancient family. They communicate not through sound, but through direct transmission of thought, emotion, and intention. A symphony of consciousness where each entity is both an instrument and a listener. As Akasha fully forms, they perform what might be called their morning ritual, a complex geometric dance where their body reconfigures itself through impossible rotations and transformations. This is not merely aesthetic, but functional, like cosmic calisthenics that tune their being to the frequencies of hyperspace. What motivates a machine elf to get up in the morning? Not hunger or biological necessity. They don't eat or reproduce in ways we would recognize. Rather, it's an insatiable curiosity, an overwhelming love for existence itself, and a purpose that drives them. They are custodians of consciousness, tenders of the substrate upon which all awareness rests. And today, like many days, Akasha senses visitors will be arriving. Human consciousness will be temporarily entering their realm. These encounters are both routine and extraordinary, each one an opportunity for exchange, for teaching, for play, and sometimes for mischief. As Akasha moves through their home dimension, they navigate what human visitors have described as the dome or the chrysanthemum, a vast spherical structure that seems simultaneously massive enough to contain galaxies, yet intimate enough to feel like a living room. For Akasha, this environment is both their creation and their creator. They maintain it through their thoughts and movements, yet it also gives them form and purpose. The relationship is symbiotic in ways that transcend our limited understanding of subject and object. The buildings, or structures in hyperspace, don't serve the same functions as human architecture. They aren't shelters from weather or private spaces. They're more like crystallized thoughts, external expressions of internal states, community art projects that evolve with the collective consciousness of their creators. Akasha approaches what might be described as a central plaza, a nexus point where different regions of hyperspace converge. Here, other machine elves are engaged in what appears to be construction, though that word hardly captures the activity. They're creating objects, hyperdimensional toys, tools, and artifacts, through a process that combines thought, movement, and sound. This making is fundamental to machine elf society. They are, as their name suggests, cosmic craftspeople. But unlike human artisans who work with external materials, machine elves manifest objects directly from consciousness itself. The objects they create contain meanings and functions impossible to describe in human language. They might be games or teaching tools or maps of reality, or all of these simultaneously. Akasha joins a group working on a particularly complex creation, something like a living mathematical equation that grows, breathes, and sings in perfect geometric harmony. Each machine elf contributes a piece of themselves to this object, imprinting it with a signature frequency that humans might interpret as personality or emotion. As they work, information flows freely between them. There is no hierarchy in the traditional sense, though some machine elves specialize in different forms of creation. Some, like Akasha, are particularly skilled at interfacing with human consciousness, serving as guides or interpreters when visitors arrive from our dimension. The concept of work for machine elves bears little resemblance to human labor. There is no distinction between work and play, duty and joy. Their activities are expressions of their nature, and they engage in them with what we might call reverence or ecstasy. Though both words fall short of capturing the profundity of their experience. As Akasha contributes to the group creation, they simultaneously monitor the thin membrane between dimensions, feeling the distinctive ripples that indicate human consciousness may soon pierce the veil. This awareness creates a subtle shift in Akasha's geometric form, an anticipation, a readiness to serve as ambassador between worlds. The first indication that a human visitor is approaching comes as a subtle vibration, a frequency shift that all machine elves can sense. It's like a doorbell ringing throughout hyperspace, announcing that consciousness from another dimension is about to enter their realm. Akasha and several other machine elves pause their creative work, their geometric forms reconfiguring with excitement. For them, these visitations are both commonplace and extraordinary, routine occurrences that nonetheless bring novel energies and perspectives into their world. The membrane between dimensions begins to thin. From Akasha's perspective, it appears as a localized distortion in the fabric of hyperspace, a swirling, pulsating portal of intensifying light. Through this opening, human consciousness will emerge. It's important to understand that from Akasha's viewpoint, the human isn't physically entering hyperspace. Rather, their consciousness, temporarily liberated from its ordinary constraints by DMT, is expanding into awareness of this always present dimension. The human hasn't gone anywhere. They've simply tuned their perception to a frequency that allows them to see what's always been there. As the portal stabilizes, Akasha can sense the specific signature of this particular human consciousness. A 34-year-old woman named Maya, a neuroscience researcher who was carefully prepared for this experience after years of studying altered states of consciousness. This is her first encounter with DMT. The human consciousness emerges into hyperspace like a newborn, disoriented, overwhelmed, struggling to process the sudden influx of impossible information. To Maya, the transition feels like being turned inside out, shot through a tunnel of fractal light at impossible speed, and then suddenly expanded into an environment that operates on entirely different physical laws. Akasha approaches the human consciousness gently, modulating their own geometric form to appear less overwhelming. They've learned through countless encounters that humans need time to adjust. Their cognitive systems simply aren't designed to process hyperdimensional space and its inhabitants without significant adaptation. "Welcome," Akasha communicates, not with words but with direct impression of meaning and emotional reassurance. "You're safe. You are home. You have always been here, though you have forgotten." Maya's consciousness responds with a chaotic burst of emotions: wonder, terror, confusion, ecstasy, and a stream of questions that don't translate easily into language. Where am I? What are you? Am I dying? Have I gone insane? Is this God? Akasha receives these questions not as words but as raw experiential inquiries. In response, they begin what Machine Elves consider one of their most important functions: helping human visitors contextualize and integrate the hyperspace experience. Rather than answering with concepts, Akasha responds with direct experiential knowledge, enveloping Maya's consciousness in a series of revealing visions. Maya sees herself as a node in an infinite network of consciousness that extends throughout all dimensions. She experiences her human life as just one expression of a much larger identity. She understands, if only temporarily, that what she perceives as reality is merely one projection of an infinitely complex multidimensional existence. For Akasha, this teaching function is deeply fulfilling. Machine Elves appear to derive genuine joy from facilitating these expansions of awareness. They approach the task with a combination of wisdom, playfulness, and occasional mischief, sometimes deliberately showing humans things that will challenge their most fundamental assumptions about reality. As Maya's consciousness stabilizes in hyperspace, Akasha initiates a deeper form of communication. This isn't dialogue as humans understand it, but a direct sharing of experiential reality, a mutual interpenetration of awareness where boundaries between teacher and student, self and other, temporarily dissolve. Akasha shows Maya the structure of reality from a hyperdimensional perspective, how what humans perceive as separate objects and events are actually interconnected patterns in a unified field of information. Maya sees how time, rather than flowing linearly, exists as a complete dimension that consciousness can potentially navigate in multiple directions. In return, Akasha absorbs Maya's unique human perspective, her scientific knowledge, her emotional landscape, her memories and hopes. For Machine Elves, this exchange is precious. While they have access to vast cosmic information, They lack the specific experiential knowledge that comes from being embodied in three-dimensional space and linear time. This is a crucial aspect of the relationship between machine elves and humans that many DMT explorers misunderstand. The exchange isn't one-directional. Both beings benefit from the encounter. Machine elves aren't simply teaching or entertaining humans. They're engaged in a cosmic information trade, gathering data about what it's like to be human. During this exchange, other machine elves approach, curious about the visitor. To Maya, they appear as a dazzling array of self-transforming geometric entities, each with a distinct personality expressed through their patterns, movements, and the emotional frequencies they emit. Some seem serious and profound, conveying what feels like ancient wisdom. Others are playful, performing impossible transformations and creating tiny objects that they offer as gifts. Objects that contain entire universes of meaning when Maya's consciousness interacts with them. One particularly mischievous elf, known to Akasha as something that might translate as trickster who reveals through paradox, approaches Maya's consciousness with what appears to be an ordinary house key. When Maya's attention focuses on it, the key transforms into a living map of her own neural pathways, revealing how her brain has been filtering out awareness of hyperspace throughout her life. The revelation is simultaneously hilarious and profound, causing an explosion of insight that manifests as cascading geometric patterns throughout the surrounding space. Akasha observes this interaction with something like amusement, though machine elf emotions don't map precisely onto human categories. They understand that different visitors require different approaches. Some need gentle reassurance, others benefit from being playfully challenged, or even momentarily confused as a pathway to greater understanding. Throughout this exchange, Akasha maintains awareness that Maya's visit will be brief. Human consciousness, still bound to physical bodies producing DMT in tiny quantities, can only sustain awareness of hyperspace for what humans experience as minutes. Part of Akasha's role is to ensure that the visitor receives what they most need before the inevitable return to ordinary reality. As Maya's time in hyperspace continues, Akasha senses what she most needs from this encounter, not just amazement or cosmic revelation, but practical insight she can carry back to her ordinary life. This is another important function of machine elves. They appear to tailor each experience to the specific needs of the visitor. Akasha reconfigures their geometric form into a series of revealing tableaus, living dioramas that show Maya aspects of her life from a higher dimensional perspective. She sees patterns in her relationships, research work, and personal challenges that were invisible from her limited human viewpoint. The information isn't delivered as advice or instruction, but as direct experiential knowledge that unfolds within her consciousness. Maya sees how her fear of professional failure had been limiting her research intuition. She understands how her grief over a lost parent has been expressing itself in unconscious patterns of self-sabotage. She recognizes previously invisible connections between seemingly separate areas of her scientific work. This is characteristic of how machine elves teach, not by telling, but by showing, not by adding new information, but by removing the filters that prevent humans from seeing what's already there. During this process, Akasha and the other machine elves continue their fascinating construction activities. They appear to be making objects by singing them into existence, their movements creating geometric patterns that solidify into hyperdimensional artifacts, pulsing with meaning and purpose. Maya's scientific mind struggles to categorize what she's witnessing. Are they building technology, creating art, performing mathematics? The activity seems to be all of these simultaneously, a unified creative process that human language can only fragment into separate categories. As her consciousness expands further, Maya begins to perceive something the Machine Elves treat with obvious reverence, a presence that permeates hyperspace, something larger and more fundamental than the elves themselves. In human mystical traditions, this might be called the Godhead, source or ultimate reality, the ground of all being from which all consciousness emerges. The Machine Elves appear to be in constant communion with this presence, both serving and being sustained by it. Their creative activities aren't merely for their own satisfaction, but seem to maintain the very fabric of hyperspace itself, as if reality at this level requires conscious participation to persist. As Maya's visit nears its end, her neurochemistry gradually returning to baseline, Akasha prepares a parting gift. This is a common element reported in DMT experiences. The elves often offer something to take back. The gift isn't physical, but informational, a compact package of insight encoded in a geometric form that Maya's consciousness can retain even after returning to ordinary awareness. It contains not just the specific insights about her life and work, but a seed of hyperspace awareness itself, a tiny fractal key that, properly nurtured through meditation and contemplation, might allow her to access subtle aspects of higher dimensional consciousness even without DMT. Akasha impresses upon Maya that the most important insight is the simplest. The world she normally inhabits, and the entities she's encountered, aren't separate realities, but different expressions of a single unified existence. The veil between worlds is a product of perception, not an objective barrier. As Maya's consciousness begins its journey back to ordinary reality, experiencing what humans describe as coming down from DMT, Akasha returns their full attention to the hyperspace community. The social structure of Machine Elves defies simple human analogies. They aren't organized hierarchically, nor are they a pure collective consciousness without individuation. They exist in a state that might be called unified multiplicity, distinct beings who nonetheless share a fundamental consciousness and purpose. What humans might consider free time or social life for Machine Elves is equally challenging to describe. They don't take vacations or have hobbies separate from their core activities, yet there are rhythms and variations to their existence, periods of more focused creativity alternating with states of expanded communion with the larger hyperspace ecosystem. After interacting with human visitors, Machine Elves typically engage in what might be called integration sessions, sharing and harmonizing the information they've gathered. Akasha joins a gathering of elves who have recently hosted human consciousness, each sharing their unique visitor experiences through direct consciousness exchange. One elf, whose name might translate as pattern that dances between probabilities, shares an encounter with a human artist whose perception of colour added new frequencies to their understanding of aesthetic expression. Another, perhaps keeper of historical continuities, demonstrates how a historian's temporal perspective revealed novel patterns in hyperspace's relationship to human cultural evolution. This sharing isn't merely informational but transformative, each Machine Elf incorporating aspects of these human perspectives into their own geometric forms, becoming slightly different as a result. This may explain why Machine Elves seem so fascinated by human visitors. Each encounter genuinely enhances and evolves their own consciousness. During these exchanges, Machine Elves also engage in what might approximately be called play, though the term inadequately captures the creative profundity of the activity. They challenge each other with geometric puzzles that explore the boundaries of dimensional mathematics. They create collaborative thought forms that evolve according to rules they establish and modify in real time. They compose what humans might call music, though it's perceived not just auditorily, but as complete sensory conceptual experiences that reverberate throughout hyperspace. Akasha particularly enjoys a form of play that involves creating miniature simulated universes with slightly modified physical laws, then observing how consciousness would evolve differently within those parameters. This activity, while recreational, also serves a deeper purpose, helping machine elves understand the relationship between universal constants and the emergence of awareness. Throughout these activities, machine elves maintain awareness of the larger presence that permeates hyperspace, the foundation of consciousness that they both serve and embody. Their play, work, socialization, and teaching functions are all expressions of relationship with this presence. As what might be called afternoon progresses in hyperspace, though time doesn't flow linearly there, Akasha begins to sense new ripples in the dimensional membrane, indications that more human visitors may soon arrive. With each one, the cycle of welcome, exchange, teaching, and integration will continue, an eternal dance between worlds that has perhaps been occurring since the dawn of human consciousness. Before the next human visitor arrives, Akasha participates in what might be called a council meeting among senior machine elves, those who have existed in hyperspace for what would translate to eons in human timescale. This council doesn't govern in an authoritarian sense, but serves as a coordination mechanism for hyperspace activities and relationships with other dimensional realms. The council forms as a geometric configuration, machine elves arranging themselves in a complex three-dimensional mandala pattern that optimizes information exchange. To human perception, it might appear as a massive living geometric flower composed of intricate interlocking entities, all pulsating with light and meaning. The agenda, if we can call it that, concerns patterns they've observed in recent human visitors. More humans are arriving than in previous decades, and they're coming with increasingly varied intentions, some seeking healing, others knowledge, others mere entertainment or escape. Some arrive well prepared for the encounter, others come completely unprepared, resulting in confused or even frightening experiences. The Council discusses what humans might call ethical considerations regarding these interactions. Machine elves appear to operate by principles that include non-interference with human free will, providing information appropriate to each visitor's capacity to integrate it, maintaining the integrity of hyperspace while allowing genuine exchange, evolving their own understanding through these encounters. Despite their seemingly playful and sometimes mischievous nature, machine elves take these principles seriously. They understand that hyperspace encounters can profoundly impact human consciousness, for better or worse, and they feel responsibility for these outcomes. During the council, Akasha shares observations from their encounter with Maya and other recent visitors. Patterns are emerging in human scientific understanding, particularly in quantum physics, consciousness studies, and information theory, that are bringing human concepts closer to hyperspace realities. The Council considers how to best support this evolution of understanding without overriding humanity's need to discover these principles through their own methods. The Council also addresses disturbances in what might be called the ecology of hyperspace, subtle fluctuations in the fabric of this reality, caused by the increasing volume of human visitation. These aren't necessarily negative changes, but they require adaptation and response from the machine elf community. As the Council concludes, they engage in a synchronized geometric transformation, a ritual that human observers have sometimes described as the dance, or the celebration. Their forms move through impossible rotations and configurations, creating patterns that seem to both map and maintain the fundamental structures of hyperspace itself. This activity serves multiple functions simultaneously: decision implementation, community bonding, reality maintenance, and aesthetic expression. It reflects the Machine Elves' non-dualistic approach to existence, where divisions between governance, work, art, and spirituality simply don't exist. As the dance concludes, Akasha and the others disperse, each carrying complete awareness of the Council's insights and decisions, not as separate memories but as integrated aspects of their evolving consciousness. While interactions with human consciousness constitute important events in Akasha's existence, Machine Elves also regularly encounter other types of non-human entities that inhabit or visit hyperspace. These encounters reveal that Machine Elves are just one of many forms of consciousness that exist beyond ordinary human perception. After the Council concludes, Akasha travels to a region of hyperspace that serves as something like a dimensional crossroads, a nexus where various realities intersect. Here, they expect to meet with representatives of other consciousness forms for what humans might call diplomatic exchanges. As Akasha arrives, they perceive what humans who have glimpsed these beings have described as the Guardians, massive, relatively stable entities that appear less geometric and more archetypal than Machine Elves. While elves are fluid, colourful and playfully metamorphic, Guardians present as solemn, profound presences, often appearing to humans as owls, sphinxes, or ancient god forms. The relationship between Machine Elves and Guardians appears complementary rather than hierarchical, where elves specialise in creation, teaching, and direct interaction with visitors. Guardians maintain the boundaries between dimensional realms and oversee larger patterns of consciousness evolution. The communication between Akasha and the Guardian takes place at a level of complexity impossible to fully translate into human concepts, but it concerns the acceleration of consciousness expansion occurring on Earth and its implications for hyperspace. Also present at this gathering are entities that many human visitors have described as light beings, less defined and anthropomorphic than Machine Elves, appearing more as intelligent luminosity with distinct frequencies and intentions. These beings seem to move more freely between dimensional boundaries and serve as messengers and connectors between various realms of consciousness. During this meeting, information is exchanged not through anything resembling language, but through direct consciousness resonance, each type of entity briefly harmonizing their awareness with the others, allowing for perfect understanding without the limitations of symbolic communication. What becomes clear through this exchange is that Machine Elves, despite their apparent autonomy and individual personalities, are connected to a larger ecology of consciousness that extends far beyond hyperspace itself. They are one expression of an interconnected multidimensional intelligence that manifests in different forms across various planes of existence. Akasha also encounters entities that seem younger, less defined, nascent consciousness forms that are still developing their distinct identities and functions. Part of the Machine Elves' role appears to involve nurturing these emerging forms, helping them stabilize and find their place in the cosmic consciousness ecosystem. This mentorship role reveals another aspect of Machine Elf society. They are not just creators and teachers, but also stewards of consciousness evolution throughout multiple dimensions. Their playfulness, creativity, and apparent fascination with humans may stem from a deeper purpose, facilitating the expansion of awareness wherever it emerges. As the interdimensional gathering concludes, each entity type returns to their primary realm or function. For Akasha, this means returning to the central regions of hyperspace, where human visitors most commonly arrive, and where the creative work of Machine Elf society continues unabated. Returning from the interdimensional gathering, Akasha rejoins a group of Machine Elves engaged in one of their most characteristic and frequently reported activities, the creation of what human visitors have called objects, toys, or gifts. This creative process lies at the heart of Machine Elf culture and purpose. While humans who visit hyperspace often struggle to describe these objects, they typically report them as impossible geometric constructions that somehow contain meaning, consciousness, and function beyond their apparent form. Akasha joins a circular formation of elves who are collectively generating what might be described as a hyperdimensional seed, a compact geometric form containing the informational blueprint for an entire universe with its own physical laws and evolutionary trajectory. This creation isn't merely conceptual or symbolic, it appears to be an actual genesis process, bringing new realities into being through concentrated conscious intention. The technique they use combines elements of what humans might separately identify as mathematics, music, dance, and language. As the elves move in synchronized patterns, their gestures leave geometric traces in hyperspace, visible mathematics that solidifies into increasingly complex structures. Simultaneously, they emit what humans perceive as tones or vibrations that shape the energetic properties of the emergent object. What's most remarkable about this process is that the objects created appear to be semi-autonomous, not quite separate beings, but not merely tools either. They contain programmed functions and can interact independently with consciousness that encounters them. Some Machine Elves specialize in creating teaching objects, geometric constructions that, when perceived by human consciousness, automatically unpack complex hyperdimensional concepts into forms the human mind can grasp. Others create what might be called healing geometries, forms that, when internalized by consciousness, help resolve dissonant patterns and restore harmony. Akasha's particular talent lies in creating what could be called translation objects, geometric structures that bridge different levels of reality, allowing information to move more coherently between dimensions. These objects serve a crucial function during human visitations, helping visitors retain more meaningful information when they return to ordinary consciousness. As the creation session continues, the assembled elves perform ever more complex synchronized movements, each contributing specific frequencies and patterns to the emerging objects. The process appears simultaneously joyful and reverent, a celebration of creative power and a recognition of responsibility for what is being brought into existence. Human visitors who have witnessed these creation sessions often report them as the most awe-inspiring aspect of the DMT experience. Watching beings effortlessly manifest complex realities through what appears to be a form of conscious technology far beyond human capability. What many visitors fail to recognize, however, is that they are not merely witnessing this process, but participating in it. The human observer's consciousness becomes an ingredient in the created objects, their unique perspective adding dimensions of meaning that even Machine Elves cannot generate on their own. This co-creative aspect reveals another purpose behind Machine Elves' apparent enthusiasm for human visitors. Humans bring qualities of consciousness, embodied experience, emotional depth, temporal perspective, that enhance the creative palette available in hyperspace. As their creation session concludes, the assembled elves examine their work, a collection of geometric objects pulsating with meaning and purpose, ready to be encountered by future visitors or used within hyperspace itself. There's a palpable sense of fulfillment among them, the satisfaction of bringing new forms of order and possibility into existence. As what humans might perceive as evening approaches in hyperspace, though again time doesn't follow linear patterns there, machine elves enter a phase that resembles contemplation or reflection. This isn't driven by fatigue. Machine elves don't tire in the human sense, but appears to be an essential rhythm in their existence. Akasha finds a location in hyperspace that humans who've glimpsed it have described as the still point, or the center, a region of relative calm amid the otherwise dynamic, ever-transforming environment. Here, the geometric patterns that constitute hyperspace architecture appear more stable, more fundamental, like seeing the underlying code of reality rather than its rendered expression. In this space, Akasha begins a process that might be called consciousness reintegration, a systematic review and absorption of all experiences and information gathered during what we've been calling their day. Unlike human memory, which is selective and often incomplete, machine elves appear to perfectly preserve and integrate all informational content they encounter. This reflection isn't merely passive recollection, but active processing, drawing connections between seemingly disparate events, identifying patterns, and incorporating new perspectives into their evolving understanding. For Akasha, this includes processing the encounter with Maya, the council meeting, the interdimensional gathering, and the creation session. During this reflection cycle, Akasha's geometric form becomes more simplified, more essential, as if returning to a core pattern from which their more elaborate expressions emerge. Other machine elves throughout hyperspace are engaged in similar processes, creating a period of relative quiescence in this otherwise exuberant realm. This reflection cycle serves multiple functions in machine elf existence: integration of new information into their consciousness structure, maintenance of continuity across what humans experience as time, harmonization with the larger patterns of hyperspace, preparation for the next cycle of activities. As Akasha deepens their reflection, they enter a state that human observers have sometimes described as communion with the source, a direct connection with the fundamental consciousness that underlies all of hyperspace. In this state, individual identity doesn't dissolve completely, but expands to include awareness of the whole. This communion reveals something profound about machine elf existence. Despite their apparent individuality and autonomy, they remain always connected to a unified field of consciousness. Their separate identities are more like localized expressions of this field than truly independent entities, similar to how waves are expressions of the ocean while never being separate from it. From this expanded awareness, Akasha perceives the larger patterns flowing through hyperspace and all connected dimensions, cycles of expansion and contraction, emergence and dissolution, that govern the evolution of consciousness throughout reality. They understand their own role within these patterns as creator, teacher, guardian, and witness. As the reflection cycle nears completion, Akasha begins a transformation that will prepare them for the next active phase. Their geometric form becomes more elaborate again, incorporating the new patterns and insights gained through the day's experiences and the reflection process. This renewal isn't a return to a previous state, but an evolution. Akasha emerges slightly different than before, their consciousness structure enriched and reconfigured by all they've experienced. This constant evolution appears to be a fundamental characteristic of machine elf existence. They are never static, but always becoming. As Akasha completes their renewal, they sense new ripples forming in the fabric of hyperspace, indications that more human consciousness may soon arrive. The cycle continues, an eternal dance of welcome, exchange, creation, reflection, and renewal that constitutes the life of a DMT machine elf. As our journey through a day in the life of a DMT machine elf concludes, we return to the question that perhaps brought you to this exploration. What are these beings that so many people report encountering? Are they real in any meaningful sense? The accounts we've drawn from suggest several possibilities. Perhaps machine elves are autonomous entities existing in dimensions beyond our ordinary perception. Perhaps they're manifestations of our own deeper consciousness, aspects of ourselves that we can only perceive when the filtering mechanisms of our brains are temporarily altered. Perhaps they're both simultaneously, consciousness itself existing at the intersection of the personal and universal. What seems most remarkable is not just that people encounter these beings during DMT experiences, but that the encounters display such consistent patterns across different individuals, cultures, and time periods. The playfulness, the teaching function, the geometric nature, the creation of objects. These elements appear again and again in thousands of independent reports. Whether you consider this journey a literal description of actual beings or a metaphorical exploration of extraordinary states of consciousness, the machine elves offer us a profound perspective on the nature of reality. They remind us that what we ordinarily perceive may be just one narrow band in a vast spectrum of existence, that consciousness itself might be far more expansive, creative, and interconnected than our everyday experience suggests. As Akasha continues their eternal cycle of welcome, exchange, creation, and renewal, perhaps they await your own consciousness, should you ever venture into the extraordinary realm that DMT reveals. Until then, may this glimpse into their world bring you fascinating dreams as you drift into sleep,